Hello and good morning everybody, and welcome to this ISM webinar. I know you'll get plenty of practical advice from today's session which you can start applying to your own roles straight away. This webinar will be made available on demand as soon as we finish, so you can watch it as many times as you like and at your own convenience. As attendees, you can ask any questions during this presentation by typing them into the box above. We will answer these questions at the end. I'll be assisting with the multiple choice questions and relaying the results back to the presenter. There are also attachments which I will invite you all to download at your own convenience. To introduce our presenter, Nigel is the founder of Sandler Training in Birmingham. He works with businesses owners to create a culture of success. He has built sales teams in the UK, US, Canada, and Mexico by focusing on having the right people, processes, and culture. Today he is an advocate of the disruptive and counterintuitive Sandler sales methodology. His award-winning approach to sales and stellar track record has given him the opportunity to work with management teams and sales teams in over 100 industries. He is also invited to talk, entertain, and challenge mindsets at various business leader events, and now ISM webinars. I'll pass over to Nigel now, and he'll be the next voice you hear. Nigel.
Great. Thanks very much, Adam. Thanks very much for the introduction. Now, for those of you on the other end of the line, as Max put it, the best laid plans sometimes go awry, and he's panicking about a fire alarm going off at his end. So if we do hear that, don't worry. You don't have to evacuate your office. Anyway, here's what we're going to cover. We're going to look at what really is how really do we, first of all, identify if salespeople are failing, and what can we do about it. And we'll also talk about some of the preventative. We'll be covering this from three areas. We'll look at some particular techniques, but we'll also look at the behaviors and the mindsets behind this to, first of all, understand why salespeople fail, and then figure out what we might be able to do about that. If we can skip to the next slide. I'll be covering a fair amount of stuff here, and going back to this slide, as we go through this, there's nothing for sale today, obviously, but if you could just make a decision as to what sort of follow-up action you might like to take, one of the things I'd highly recommend, especially if you're familiar with Sandler but maybe haven't yet attended one of our events, then we run regular events, break the rules and close more deals around the country. I've got my next one here in Longbridge, Birmingham on October the 10th. Wherever you are in the country, there's probably a centre within an hour's drive of you. This is an event that may cost you a small amount of money, or it may be free depending on what's going on in the training centre. But this is a great starting place for trying to understand what might be going wrong in the sales process for your salespeople. If you want to just read some information before you decide whether to turn up to one of our events, then there's a white paper that we're able to give you access to called Why Salespeople Fail and What You Can Do About It. That's a downloadable thing, no charge. Also no charge are a whole series of podcasts, How to Succeed. If you're a podcaster and you enjoy listening to podcasts, these are great for the car. And we cover many, many different topics, sales related, sales management related. And finally, I run some regular seminars about how to create a winning sales team. And if you want an invitation to one of those, you're more than welcome to go ahead and email me. So, finally moving on to the next slide. Thank you. We're having slight technical difficulty. Max, I don't know, Adam, should I be moving the slides, or should you?
I'll be, if you can move the slides.
Yep.
The next question I'd like to ask everyone, and yes, I am quite nervous. There is a fire alarm about to go off. But
Let's go back to the previous. Can we just go back to that previous slide? The
Sure.
cartoon slide? Okay, great. sorry audience, Adam and I are fighting over control of the buttons here. Anyway, I seem to have won temporarily. This cartoon is something that it's been doing around for about 30 years. And when I first saw this cartoon, something resonated inside me, and I've shared this with a number of people, and I think there's a couple of different reactions to this. The first one is the complete irony. Here's a guy that's obviously in serious need of a machine gun, but he's claiming to be too busy. And when we look at that, sometimes we look at it from the point of view of, oh, these damn prospects. I've got the most fantastic product for them. I've got the most fantastic service. If only they really knew what it was I had, they'd want to speak to me. And we can end up, if we're not careful, blaming the prospect for not having the conversation with us. And certainly in my early career in sales, that's what I would feel a lot of the time, externalizing that blame. Later on, as I moved into management, started to work with sales teams, I realized that, hey, you know, let's take for granted that we've got a great product or a great service and these guys need it. The skill of the salesperson is to put themselves in that situation where they're in danger of having a conversation with someone that needs our stuff. And therefore, we cannot blame the prospect. So if we move on to the next slide. Am I hitting the button or are you hitting the button? I'll hit
Charge the buttons, Nigel.
Okay, great.
So what I'd like to ask everyone, this is one of the multiple choice questions. I'd like to ask you all, what would be the cost of a bad hire? So what does a failing salesperson cost you? A, the recruiter's fee. B, the recruiter's fee, loss management time and salary. At least 1 times annual salary, 2 to 5 times annual salary, or more than 5 times annual salary. So what I'll do is I will just launch that vote now, and I'll wait for you all to vote. I'll give you about 20 seconds or so for those results to come in, and then I'll relay those results back to Nigel.
Thanks, Adam.
So the results are coming in as we speak. So 60% have said 2 to 5 times annual salary. 20% have said at least 1 times annual salary. And 20% have said 5 times annual salary. There's no other votes that have come in as of yet.
Yeah, again, this survey is interesting. There's no right or wrong answer for that. When I look at surveys that tend to be published every now and again, the consensus often is that a bad sales hire will cost us 2 to 5 times annual salary. A bad sales manager might be as much as 10 times, and a bad sales director could be upwards of that and put you out of business. So that's obviously everyone calculates this a different way. I have a formula, a spreadsheet that we use for helping people calculate this a bit more accurately for their particular circumstance. But the key thing here is, why wait for the sales guy to fail before we identify it? So if we move on to the next slide. What are some of those early symptoms of failure? Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm in a situation where I have gone through all that effort of hiring someone, recruiting them, training them up, and getting them into position, and now I'm managing them, I find it very easy to be in denial that they're having a problem and they're failing. I therefore might have the temptation to wait until we've had a whole series of bad sales numbers, hoping for it to miraculously turn around. In reality, if we are able to step back from the situation not get so emotionally involved, I think it's quite easy for us to spot in other people's salespeople, in other teams, some of these early symptoms of failure. Top one I've got here is where they claim they are too busy to prospect. What does too busy to prospect mean? It means that they are externalizing the blame. They themselves believe that it's not up to them to be able to carve out the prospecting time in the diary to make sure it happens. And they are ready to accept interruptions all over the place. And they externalize it by just saying, hey boss, just don't have enough time. Too busy servicing existing customers. And behind that, of course, is a mindset that does not recognize that the lifeblood of sales is prospecting. So a huge alarm bell for all of us should be when your sales guys say, gosh, I'm just too busy. If we don't address that early, 9 months later, 6 months later, 12 months later, we're going to find that they haven't brought in the new business they're supposed to have brought in. Here's another early symptom of failure. Begging for appointments. So very easy for a desperate salesperson to start begging on the phone. It sounds something like, hey, I'm going to be in the area on Thursday. I could also be there Wednesday. I'd like to stop by. Got something. This is the begging the appointment approach, where they are meeting with people who are likely to be the wrong person, not a decision maker, someone that's happy to waste their time getting a coffee for a salesperson. So that begging of appointments that you will hear going on at your end of the phone can be a sign that the sales guy is starting to feel desperate and about to fail. In the same category, quoting and hoping. And again, a lot of companies make the mistake of measuring and monitoring the wrong behavior. So if you're measuring people by the quotations, you'll get lots of quotations, and the sales guy is going to be hoping they're going to be closing. So this is a huge warning sign that we've got a potential for a failing salesperson. Discounting. Discounting can often reflect a belief that the only reason why people buy is on money, and they can be very ready to discount in order to get the business over the line. Instead of asking the prospect, hey, other than price, what else is it that we should be talking about? And this is a sign of desperation to make their money at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter. Chasing, pestering, and generally winging it and not having a systematic approach to resuscitating lost opportunities. This is a subsection of quoting and hoping, where they'll quote and pester and pester and pester, all signs of desperation. Order taking versus opportunity creating. I think it's very easy for us to, in a sales role ourselves, to delude ourselves. We feel like we're doing a good job, the money's coming in, but was that stuff that just came our way where all we had to do was take the order, or was it stuff that we dug up, identified, and an opportunity that we created? So this is, this mindset of just taking orders versus creating demand is a very early indicator that they might be reliant too much on other people's efforts rather than their own. Not to say that taking orders isn't a bad thing, but it's something to be aware of. And as I mentioned before, excuses. All sorts of excuses in general, not just about being too busy to prospect, but, oh, boss, if only our website produced me better leads, if only our brochures were up to date, if only we had better search engine optimization, if only you bought me a faster car, I could see 2.5 more people every month because I get there faster, or whatever it is. This is externalizing the blame that is an indicative that the salesperson is denying what's really going on. Adam, do you want to do this question?
Fantastic. I think the fire alarm actually went, so we're all good. So, true or false? You have to wait at least one sales cycle to know if a person is failing. So, true or false? So, what will happen now again as before? A slide will appear over the front. I'll just wait for those answers to come through. So, true or false? You have to wait at least one sales cycle to know if a salesperson is failing. A, true. B, false.
That was a slightly rhetorical question.
Right, there we go. I'll stop the audience voting. So 75% have said false. Gary.
Yes, that's. If we have clear leading indicators rather than lagging indicator, and sales is a lagging indicator of what behavior the salesperson is doing, and therefore understanding really what those leading indicators are means that we do not have to wait a whole sales cycle to find out whether we have a failing salesperson. Now, another sign that we have a failing salesperson is they have no written plans or processes. One of the questions I like to ask sales guys that I'm interviewing is, show me your prospecting plan. Tell me about your prospecting plan. How often do you review your prospecting plan with your manager? Tell me about your prospecting plans for your next job. So if people don't have plans or processes, they take a very wing-it approach to every situation. And if someone does, for example, not have a written account management plan, then they're in danger of neglecting an existing customer and not growing it. They're also in danger of over-servicing and spending too much time with customers that don't warrant it. And that, of course, detracts from the time they might spend on their prospecting plan if they have one. A salesperson that does not have written plans or written processes is setting themselves up for failure. And as a manager, obviously, it's our job to make sure that they know what a prospecting plan looks like, an account management plan looks like, and a sales process looks like. Here's another one. No personal presence. A lot of people have perhaps the wrong impression of the impression they should give to people. With a high level of self-awareness, they can avoid many of these common pitfalls that I have here. So a salesperson's perception of himself might be that he's confident, knowledgeable, persuasive, convincing, enthusiastic, busy, friendly, persistent, diligent, etc. How does that really look like? How does that really appear to the customer? And if we're not careful, it's very easy for that enthusiastic salesperson, especially if they're new in the job and they want to impress their boss and they want to impress people, they can appear cocky. They can appear pushy. They maybe take great pride in their product knowledge, understanding of the service and the company, and will take great pride in convincing the prospective customer on all the features, advantages, benefits, and why they should buy, without realizing that this just makes them look pushy and argumentative and salesy and often desperate. So personal presence is a key leading indicator as to whether that person will fail or not. Do they have the correct personal presence for your target market? Next question. Next slide. Skills. No effective skills. And here's a little checklist. It's not complete, but if you're a manager and you're watching this presentation, what you might like to do is take this and use it as a checklist. Put the name of your salesperson or each salesperson at the top of this checklist and rate them on a 1 to 10 scale. How effective are their lead generation skills? How effective are the relationship building skills? Establishing equality, questioning and qualifying, account management, all these essential sales skills. Rate them 1 to 10. Have them rate themselves. And the key question is, where are you now? Where do you think you should be? And which of those skills should you be working on? In absence of doing something like this, they can be in denial that they are missing those essential skills. They're doing a lot of it, but ineffectively. That's a huge, huge warning sign. Another reason why people fail: no commitment or minimal commitment. No commitment to accountability, no commitment to ongoing skills building, and no commitment to self-improvement. I could add a few other things to that list, but here's what I mean by commitment. Commitment is when you ask someone, tell me about your accountability process. They can show you what they're tracking, they can show you when they report it, and they can share with you, here's where I have my conversation with my accountability partner, and it's a date in the diary. If they don't have a time and date and accurate stuff in the diary, that reflects a lack of commitment to it. I could include other things on the list, but I would say those are the top 3 early indicators to identify failure: accountability, skills building, self-improvement. Now, here's something that we can very easily miss when we're intellectualizing the sales process. Successful salespeople have a huge amount of guts. They're able to take risks. They understand that intuitively that success is just the other side of that fear barrier. So do they have the courage to do what it takes to get them to where they need to go? Do they have that belief in themselves, that understanding that success is just the other side of that fear barrier, and failure is part of the process to get us towards success, not something to be feared. Fear of failure, fear of embarrassment, those are a couple of things that can really get in the way of people being courageous enough to do what it takes to be successful in sales. Now, if we're talking about how we might be able to prevent this from happening, management, as you guys all know, is about systems and processes. Sales management is about helping your guys create the appropriate systems and processes for sales, prospecting, account management. The salesperson has a tendency to focus on closing the deal, very outcome-based. Our job as managers is to help them step outside of that and build an effective system for doing everything that they need to do. I've got some on the list here: coaching, accountability, planning and goal setting. If you can often prevent failure by helping people put time in their diary to spend on these activities. Take the last one, developing and sharing best practice. When you look at people who are at the absolute tops of their profession, professional football players, musicians, artists, and let's go back to professional football players for a moment. I think ask yourself the question, how long do these guys spend practicing versus actually on the job? A professional football player might spend 90 or 180 minutes a week actually playing the game. The rest of the time is practicing, it's strategizing, it's developing skills, it's sharing best practice. And this, above all, can prevent salespeople from failing. Having systems and processes in place for developing and sharing best practice. Here's an example of a sales process, and this I stole from a client of mine. They're a bit better at the graphics on the computer than me, so again, this won't fit your process, but it's an illustration. And being able to, first of all, visualize that sales is a process, and then being able to document in more detail behind these bullet points what you need to do every step of the process, emphasizes to the salesperson not only that it is a process, but what are the skills that we need for each step of the process. For those of you that have BDIs, you'll also notice that this particular client is emphasizing that the sales process does not go on forever. There's little clocks above each of those boxes, and this whole, what they call the market wave process, takes 2 weeks. So the job of the sales guy is to qualify and disqualify within 2 weeks. If it's taking longer than 2 weeks, then that's stalled, in their case, unacceptably. And let's not flog a dead horse. Let's not be quoting and hoping. Let's not be chasing. Instead, let's develop our skills to go and prospect for new ones, and develop our skills in having people make decisions so we're not left in this no man's land of, we'll think about it, I'll get back to you. So there's an example of a process there for sales. But do you have in your business a process that you can describe, you can document, you can share for everything that we need in our business? For sales, for prospecting, for account management, for coaching, for accountability, planning, goal setting, developing and sharing best practice. Next slide coming up is a question.
Hi guys, so a salesperson will most likely succeed if they A, interview well, B, has tremendous product and market knowledge, C, can demonstrate that they can follow a process for prospecting and selling, and D, are not afraid of failure. Right, let's start that audience voting. And if anything during this presentation inspires you to ask a question, please don't hesitate, and we'll answer those at the end as well. So it's waiting for those results to come through. So a salesperson will most likely succeed if they interview well, have tremendous product and market knowledge, can demonstrate that they can follow a process of prospecting and selling, and are not afraid of failure. So the votes coming in are 67% have said C, can demonstrate that they can follow a process of prospecting and selling, and 33% have said are not afraid of failure. Over to you.
Great. And again, I'm not sure if there is a particular right answer there. I think that D and C are Well, it shows that you've been listening to my presentation. You're giving me the answer that I want, perhaps. But generally speaking, following a process and being courageous are the attributes that we most want to find in successful salespeople, whereas the fact that they interview well is often that particular skill set. It may be slightly indicative as to whether they're going to do well initially when they encounter prospects, but if we're not careful in our interview process, we can give that far more weight than it really deserves. So if we're building an interview process, building a hiring and recruiting process, we might want to be very cautious about what we're really testing for. What can we do in our recruiting process to test that these people are not afraid of failure and they can follow a process for prospecting and selling? I just want to do a little bit more on interviewing while I'm at it here. A big challenge, and this is for both ends here, I think, is that as companies, we tend to hire people when we're busy. We might be a little bit desperate to fill a gap. We've got the budget, it's been approved, we're a man down or a lady down, and we feel like we need to hire someone. Meanwhile, we can interview a candidate who needs a job. So this is often a recipe for disaster when we have two needy people meeting. There's a huge temptation in that situation for us to not have a super effective and efficient process for making sure that we hire those people with those winning attributes. Likewise, for the salesperson looking for a career, right at the very beginning of that, we spoke about what's the cost of a bad hire. Well, flip this around a little bit. If you're a salesperson that's listening to this on the phone, what's the cost of you accepting the wrong position? What's the cost of you accepting a position where they do not have systems and processes, the right environment, a culture of success? What's the cost to you of wasting your time in an environment where you're set up to fail? So I would encourage anyone that's interviewing for a sales job to interview the interviewer to make sure that this really is the correct position for you. And it's okay for you to ask questions about systems and processes so you know what you're going in for. Here's a key way, I believe, of making sure we create winning salespeople and prevent failing sales systems. Let's create a culture. And culture tends to trump systems and processes and strategy. Let's create a culture of accountability. Ask your people, how do you hold yourself accountable for doing the stuff that you don't really want to do, but you know you have to do in order for you to be successful? Create a culture of having accountability partners and knowing not just what to hold your salespeople accountable for, but how to hold them accountable. Create a culture of continuous improvement. Do you have a culture where people can learn off each other, or are you always the person that has to come up with the suggestions? That's a lot of pressure on you as a boss. So creating a culture of continuous improvement where people can share best practice is a surefire way to prevent failure in a salesperson. Now, here, ironically, I'm moving on to the next one. What if we create a culture that rewards failure and punishes mediocrity. So here's what I mean. If people are going to do stuff that they're scared of, they are going to fail from time to time. They need to lose a battle so they can win the war. And how good are we at encouraging people to put themselves into situations where they can fail temporarily in order not to fail in the long term? So let's create a culture of rewarding failure. That might mean when someone goes out, comes back with a bloodied nose, we pat them on the back and share with everyone, wow, look what this guy just tried to do. Can you share with us what you learned from that and what you're going to do next time differently? And that putting people on pedestal that attempt to move outside their comfort zone, whether they succeed or not, is a tremendous way of building a culture of long-term success. And on the flip side of that, let's punish mediocrity. If a salesperson is in their comfort zone, seeing the same customers, selling into the same industry, selling the same size deal, then they're in their comfort zone and they're in danger of remaining mediocre. So what can we do in the company that will punish mediocrity? And if we can do all of this stuff, we will create an environment where A players can thrive. Now, here's the thing about systems and processes. If you have the wrong ones in place, mediocre salespeople will hang around forever because they've got plenty of places to hide. If you have the right ones in place, those people will tend to just drift off because they feel like they don't belong. If we treat all our people as if they are the person that they want to be, that encourages them to have belief in themselves and raise their own game. So let's create a culture in which the A players can thrive. That's moving on to the next slide. What next? So as a reminder, and we've done this as a little survey. So perhaps
so this is the survey question. So what next, guys? So you've got 5 options here: break the rules and close more deals, why salespeople fail, which is a white paper, how to succeed podcasts, creating a winning team, which is I can't speak today, seminar, and E, all of the above. So as before, I will ask.
Maybe if there's Adam, maybe if there's a dental false teeth salesperson on the line, they could let you know if you're having problems with your teeth, you can't get your words out.
I just had my teeth redone. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay. All right. So. Right. Yeah, this would be super. So the Break the Rules and Close More Deals is a 2-hour very interactive seminar that we run here in Birmingham. But if you're not in this area, we do it pretty much all over the world. There's be a local office that will do that. We'll talk in that. We talk about the traditional approach to selling, how buyers buy, the psychology behind that, and we look at guerrilla approaches and tactics so you can close more deals faster. And as a manager, how do we manage our people doing that? Why Salespeople Fail is a great white paper. How to Succeed, the podcast. Create a Winning Sales Team. That's a seminar here. This is primarily aimed at people that are managing 3 or more sales people and are looking to double the size of that team.
So, and there's also the ebook, guys, that you can download as an attachment, which Nigel has attached to this. So, okay, so we've stopped the voting on that. In terms of any other questions. There's been no questions throughout this webinar, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But if there are any questions after that we miss, of course we will answer them after it completes. I'd like to thank Nigel for his time today, taking the time to deliver this webinar, and his colleague Lee Kett at Sandler Training. I'm
just wondering, Adam,
sure,
is that a technical issue there? We've got a lot of people on the line.
I don't feel it is. If people do have any questions they want to ask, you can answer it at just typing in your questions to the question box above and initializing it at the end. Obviously, if you do have any questions afterwards, please feel free to email me at abrook@ismprofessional.com, and feel free to get in touch with us through our website as well. But everyone, thank you very much for listening. The next webinar will be taking place at 11 a.m. on the 24th of October. It will be delivered by Daniel Disney, and it's the first part of 3 on the 3 pillars of social selling. Part 1 is about becoming the brand and selling you. So thank you very much, everyone, for taking part today. Nigel?
Thank you very much for joining in. Thank you very much, Adam, for hosting this, and look forward to future events.
Fantastic. Well, this is the first of many webinars to come, so stay tuned, guys, and thank you very much for your time. Thank you and goodbye.
You.